would love to have a roadmap that feels like it's going to get us there. The problem is it's over a chasm. There is no road. So what use
Mm,
is a roadmap to
mm.
you? You've got to build a bridge.
I've played them the scene from South Park. Actually, having them laugh is a much safer way to critique a hole in the strategy, right? It might be nice if I play the Simon Mayo to your,
Flappy-handed Mark Kermode.
yeah, in the sense that like I could just talk to you about those methods and those ideas for the next hour because I think there's a lot of richness in them that I sort of half get, but I'd like to know more. It does seem to me like your ideas about how we should be approaching the current times beyond this little box here have been
Ooh.
maturing even further. So, like what's the V2 of this box given what Tom has been thinking about, I guess is my question.
It ties beautifully with your work because the more you dig into this stuff, I think the more you realize it's all about stories. It's all
Mm,
about narratives. If
yeah,
you can influence the narrative, that's how you can influence things.
very true. So, just to recap, the list you sent me was visual modeling to build a shared idea of your theory of success in caps.
Mm.
Encourage anti-fragile prioritization so that you can avoid being blown up by uncertainty. Categorizing the work, presumably experiments, we'll come back to that, using appropriate methods like JFDI versus DFIU. I hadn't heard that one. I translated in my head as don't fuck it up, but there's also deadline first there.
Oh yeah, the deadline first is right there, but you're right with the first guess.
And then work to a sustainable cadence based on signals and then influencing strategy through stories and options. So I read through that list and I was very much like, wow, this is very cool. I half get some of this. Let's talk about them. Also, I'm curious to know, let's start with what has changed for you. Let's say in the last 6 months, are there things that have forced you to mature or change your ideas? Like, has something been changing in the landscape for you that made you settle on like these things?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's come more from the landscape maybe has changed, but we
Hmm.
touched on that before as well. But I think the biggest thing that I've experienced is I've been teaching multiverse mapping to people and they've been using it. And some people have used multiverse mapping and pivot triggers and those sorts of ideas really successfully. Other people have more struggled to get to grips with them. And one thing I realized is multiverse mapping is really, really powerful and useful if you are on the side of the builders. But if you're more on the exec side, it's too down in the weeds, and you don't want to be getting
Mm,
into that sort of story. They're
mm,
not there at the coalface. They're not there with the actual fingertip feel experience of what it's like for users, etc. They're thinking
mm,
about different things, the
mm,
bigger sort of investment questions. So, what's the version that execs need to see and need to think about?
mm,
And I was thinking about stuff we've talked about before as well. I think constraints, the idea of how do you make constraints in your organization such that the things that you would like to have happen become easier and the bad behaviors become harder, I suppose.
mm.
And
Yeah.
the list that you just shared is kind of the list that I've come up with so far.
Hmm.
And I'm workshopping those with clients at the moment. Uh,
Okay,
so yeah,
nice. All right. So yeah, it really is kind of an evolution of this in a way, right? For a slightly different audience.
yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. Yeah,
Mm,
because I think I realized from a consulting perspective,
mm,
the people on the teams who want to disrupt stuff by challenging exec leadership aren't the people with the budgets. So I want to
mm,
help
mm.
them. They've got
Yeah,
innovation tactics, a low cost option, but it's going to get better results to actually go in and work with the execs and
yeah,
who have the ability to change things actually
yeah.
within
So
reason.
weirdly timely for me. So I'm coaching a team at the moment who are in a very masculine, borderline toxic startup environment and have a very difficult and pained relationship with leadership who come in and swoop and poop often. And it's very clear to me now that the emperor has no clothes,
Mm,
in the sense that there was some early success years ago. a good PMF, some growth, and now they're sort of changing their mind every week or even days about what to build. And so the product people have become this canary in the coal mine for the fact that there's no strategy. And they can't say this, they can't communicate it, that they can't even really communicate that they don't want to be treated that way. Like it's really, really pained.
That's
Um,
tough. What is that? I mean, the themes that I've seen there, it relates
mm,
to something we were talking about before we started recording. The what the
yeah,
heck's going on in tech sense
yeah,
maker project. There are loads of stories that resonate with that sort of experience. There's a lot of people having that sort of experience.
yeah.
Um, it doesn't make it okay. Uh,
No, and frankly, a lot of what I am trying to help teams with, especially sort of e-commerce market cultures, is almost the language barrier because there's usually MBAs at the top who have this very insular way of speaking, and it's almost a bit of a weapon, that kind of language often. Are you in the know? Are you not? It creates this sort of
yeah,
in-group, out-group dynamic. Unfortunately, there's not many leadership groups that are mature enough to go, actually, rather than judging everybody else for not speaking our language and not getting it, why don't we build some bridges, right? It's unfortunate that the bridges tend to come from bottom up, whereas really it should, the bridges should be being built top down. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah. At
putting that
least
aside,
like throw down a rope ladder or something.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It feels a bit like, do you speak English? That kind of thing from the execs, right? Um, and yeah, it's sort of helping those teams navigate a lot of that uncertainty. So I really like this theme of like, well, hang on a minute, how do we shift strategies? How do we think of different things that we could be games we could be playing? And I don't mean games in the manipulative sense. I mean games in terms of this stuff with leadership in
Yeah.
order to
So be
build.
aware that
Yeah.
there might be manipulative games going on.
Oh, sure. And I've had to do that. I talk in my book about placebo workshops, things like that. So I really like this theme of like, how do we shift strategies in terms of, working with a different group of people, maybe to reach similar ends, but just in different ways. So tell me a bit about this point number one, visual modeling. So I think two things struck me about this one. Um, what is it? Number one, let's be like super explicit about it. And then number two, how has it differed from the things that you've tried in the past, and how is it an adaptation?
Great. Yeah, yeah. That's lovely. What is it? So some of the points that are connected with it is this sort of bridging the vision chasm. What I've seen over and over again, and lots of people have shared that they've seen it as well, is the vision is there. We've described the vision. It's this North Star and it's wonderful and it's going to be amazing when we get there. And then we've got fires on going on right now. We know what we're doing for the next 2 weeks, and we know where we want to be in 5 years' time, but we can't see how anything we could do today has any relevance to that thing in 5 years' time. And that there's a
Right.
big chasm in between now and then. And this is the world of strategy, and it's where people then would love to have a roadmap that feels like it's going to get us there. And the problem is it's over a chasm. There isn't a roadmap over a chasm. You can't drive along a road nicely. You've got to build a bridge. You've got to construct some way to get over it. I'd never thought that before, but that's my challenge to roadmaps. There is no road. So what use
Mm,
is a roadmap to
mm,
you? What I say with this idea of use visual modeling is the typical ways that teams work on how do we realize these ideas that we've got, realize this strategy, this vision, is either we write a document or many documents in some cases. I am one of my multiverse mappers is working with an organization who would typically make, I think it was over 30 documents before they would actually get going with building something. And it was just ongoing, like massive stacks of documents to read. That's one way. The other way
mm.
is to make high fidelity paintings of what the thing might look like, high fidelity design mock ups. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen either of those work very well.
The ones I have seen work are movies. Like I've seen a few stakeholders commission movies which is really interesting. Like short
That's
film,
interesting.
the future customer business vision. Yeah. I worked adjacent to some of that at Clearleft, and it was very successful. That opened up a lot of new investments and roadmaps.
Oh, I love it. Yes. And movies, that relates really nicely to your world of stories and world of multiverse mapping because you're going to get a storyboard to make your movie. So
Yeah.
if you're going to make a movie, make it the Pixar way, which is you're going to storyboard out this thing and then figure out what works, what doesn't work. Because if you're going to make the
Mm,
full movie in high fidelity with everything moving and wonderful, you need to know that that's going to work. And the
mm,
reality is you don't. You don't know that it makes sense until you've made it.
mm,
It's very expensive to make a movie. So instead, make a storyboard. It's very, very cheap. And
mm,
that's what multiverse mapping supports for you. So
mm,
my world of visual modeling, others are available, but my skeleton is always at the moment multiverse mapping. And that is
mm,
just this simple story where you're saying, right, we're inside the business, we've got our goals, that's great, but our success always depends on the behaviors of people and systems that are outside of our control. So we use a multiverse map to step into their shoes and say, well, in order for us, the business, to succeed, this person who's in the real world needs to see this, then do this, then see this, then do this. And we just tell that story in their own words. And we start
mm.
with our favorite universe, the one where they do everything we hope they're going to do. And it's wonderful. And that's you've often seen this as a happy path, that sort of thing. But then at every step of the happy path, we'll say, well, what if they don't? What if they don't see it? What if they don't do that? And so you get all of the multiverses where it goes wrong for us and we don't get what we want and we don't deliver value and they don't give us money and blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff goes wrong. Once
Mm,
you've got that, you've got effectively, that's a model of your theory of success. In order for us to succeed, we need to get enough people to onto the green path and away from all of these many orange in the way I do multiverse mapping, orange
mm,
universes that we don't like.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
stack on top of that.
Okay. So tell me about what you've been doing differently in that regard with leadership. Like, how have you had to adapt it?
Cool. So I mentioned earlier, one thing that I tried to do earlier on was make them directly with leadership.
Mm,
What I found was you can do your multiverse map at various different levels of granularity, and the leadership tend to want to be at the very highest level of granularity, or the coarsest level of granularity, should we say. So you're looking at the big chunks that need to happen. So somebody needs to find it, they need to choose it, they need to use it, they need to get the value. That's the
mm,
big chunks. And then we've got a big set of stories about how we think we're going to do that. Well, we're going to market it through this route. We're going to use content marketing, say, or we're going to use network marketing. I don't know, whatever they think it is. Well, there are some things that absolutely have to happen in order for that marketing style to succeed, whatever that is. And so you break it down into the fewest steps that absolutely have to happen. And that is
mm,
kind of like constraint mapping as well. These are the
mm,
things that constrain our success. If we can't get anybody to read any of our content, we can't do content marketing. If we
mm,
can't get anybody to go from reading our content to being interested in buying an offer from us, then we can't do content marketing. And
mm,
these things are pretty much incontrovertible. And what we're trying to do then is communicate to leadership. This is what's blocking us. This is the challenge that lies ahead, shall we say? And it is not just build some technology. It is change some behaviors in the real world of people who we can't just make do it. We have
mm.
to we have to figure out how to get them to do it. Does that
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of yeah, so that's the big thing that's changed is bigger clumps, I suppose. Then
Yeah.
if we're working when working with a team who are building stuff, we're going to break it down into a much finer granularity and
Hmm.
looking at like details of steps along the way. Uh,
Gotcha. Yeah, because they're both more aware of it and that's the area that they work at. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. All right. So what you said here was bridging the vision chasm, strategic alignment quickly, finding gaps and problems early, building the shared model of your theory of success. But with leadership, we're doing this at the top of the pyramid, effectively, right? We're not going too far down into details. We're
yeah,
staying at that high level because that's where they're comfortable, I guess.
where they're comfortable, and like you said before, we need to speak the
Mm,
MBA's language to some degree. And
yeah.
so the MBA is, or the leadership who's got an MBA is not particularly interested in the mechanics of how you put an app or a website together, for instance, or a digital product.
Mm,
You've seen this as well, I'm sure. It tends to be, we'll just copy that. It's one of these types of things. There are hundreds of them. We're going to do it exactly like that, but we're also unique, of course, and we're differentiated somehow.
yeah. We'll figure that out
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
We're going to
indeed.
be differentiated by copying everybody else. That's our system.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Okay.
Not to say
So
that fast follower isn't a strategy that works. Just
no, no, of course
the
not.
the
Yeah.
the thing that I think we're getting at with these maps and why they can be helpful for building a shared model of our theory of success, but also often challenging, is that
Mm,
they make incoherence very clear. So if you're
mm,
telling this story and you're always, but hang on a minute, we're saying we're different, but we're the same.
mm.
And why are people picking us again? Because we're radically different, but we're exactly the same as the competitors. That doesn't add up. What do you mean there exactly? And we can sort of work through that and see what we
Yeah.
really think.
I don't know if you've seen my talks that I've been doing at conferences lately, but I talk about a moment where I realized strategy was very weak. And I've actually, this is twice now I've done this. I've played them the scene from South Park about underpants gnomes.
Underpants gnomes. That's my favorite
Yeah.
scene. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so the point I make in my conference talks is like, look, I know it might seem really weird and unprofessional to do this, but actually having them laugh at a big gap in strategy is a much safer way to critique a hole in the strategy, right? It's a way to say, hey, there's a huge problem here, but I'm not pointing fingers and I'm not even really talking about the specifics. I'm just going to play this scene and say, hey, vibes, man, like I'm just getting vibes that this step is unclear, you know, and everyone's laughing, so they take it in a bit more easily, you know.
I like that. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. I think we both have a theme of how can we make that sort of challenge safer.
Mm,
And so what I'll add onto the visual modeling that is it was someone in one of my courses triggered this realization. So, oh my God, that's what we're doing. When we make this multiverse map, what we have is loads and loads, a big long row of green and orange stickies where we've
mm,
got it went well in one universe, it went really badly in another universe. What we then do is a chain of micro pre-mortems. So you know the
mm,
pre-mortem idea, I think we've talked about that
yeah,
before from Gary
yeah,
Klein. Another thing I noticed with doing pre-mortems over the years is number one, people don't really want to do them.
mm,
Number two, granularity is wrong. So we do it at a
mm,
big scale and just think of the sort of the major things that we could think of that would go wrong. And then that means they don't connect to the work really. We don't know what to do with it
mm,
afterwards. And often there'll be like two or three things that maybe are taken on. And it tends to, people tend to worry about like launch failures and things like that,
mm.
not the idea was dead before it started type failures, which
Yeah,
are more common. Um,
yeah.
so what we do with the micro premortem is he's saying, well, just at this step, somebody opened the email that we sent them, but then they didn't click the link. They didn't click the link. What went wrong? Why not? And then we get people's stories about why they didn't click that link. And
Mm,
what people are able to do is share all of the things that they are concerned about in that same, like, this is underpants gnomes. We haven't thought
mm,
this through. There's gaps and share all of those. And then we get a load of options that we could take, options
mm,
for action that we could take, either to mitigate or clarify which of these
mm.
stories might be right and what do we do about it. And it kind of makes it safer, I think.
Um,
You're not saying it is doomed, you're just showing how it's doomed.
I think it was Kahneman and Tversky. They talk about. I remember listening to an interview with them, and or maybe just Daniel Kahneman, and he said that stuff was the most effective thing that any organization could do in almost any context. In his opinion, was to actually make it safe to go and think about how things are going to break.
Yeah,
Um,
red teaming.
and yeah, I don't know that he had any evidence for that in any sensible way, but you know, I think
He was
the
a
res
smart guy, so
I mean the I guess if you take all the sort of resistances and biases that he was studying as a method of overcoming those, probably a good safe bet.
That's
Yeah.
where we both leaned. The trick is, I think, and what multiverse mapping does, and I think what your workshop does, and the sort of way you work do, is don't make the challenging and the red teaming and that sort of stuff what you're officially doing.
Hmm.
Officially, you're making a plan together. You're doing a positive piece of work that is about constructing, it's about laying out the plan for the bridge across the vision chasm. Great. We
Mm,
are doing a sketch of our bridge. You then slip in as a sort of side effect. You're also challenging and poking that and testing the
mm,
bridge while you're doing it. Um,
yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Which brings us nicely to your second point, which is anti-fragile prioritization. Probe to benefit from uncertainty instead of being blown up by it. So again, let's talk about what that means, just in the most basic sense, and then we'll get into like how things have been implemented and shaped recently.
yeah, so anti-fragility, obviously a concept from everyone's favorite cuddly uncle, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, whose blast radius on Twitter is legendary and who is not a friendly man generally. Um,
Yeah.
but he had some points, he did have some
Hmm.
points. The idea of
Hmm.
anti-fragility is it's something that gains from disorder, uncertainty, stress, rather
Mm,
than something that is destroyed by it. And
mm,
there's a couple of examples that make it really clear. How do we gain muscle? Well, you have to strain and exert your muscles to the point where your muscle fibers are damaged in order for your muscles to then generate and become stronger.
yeah.
If you overstrain your muscles and you break them, tear them completely, then you're ruined. So
Mm,
anti-fragility is all about being in that space where it's pushing beyond your comfort zone, but not so far that you're destroyed, I suppose. Um,
hmm.
and obviously, as you gain more strength, you're able to lift heavier and heavier things to your limit, I suppose. Um,
Yeah.
which for different people is going to be different, but you can always increase your range of possibility. So that's the idea of anti-fragility in general. Does that match what
Hmm.
you were expecting? What you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I like Talib's. I don't know that I necessarily agree with them or would advocate for them, but the idea, one of the big ideas in anti-fragile, it talks about how city states, like smaller states, are more resilient. And I
Yeah.
think we're sort of seeing that play out in the US right now, right? Like, if it wasn't such a big country that affected everybody across the world, then Trump wouldn't be such a huge problem.
Yeah, that
Um,
does make a lot of sense.
and on the inverse, like it's why a country like Estonia can punch way above its weight, or Singapore, right? Is because it has some anti-fragility built into kind of its inherent size. It's those are examples of places that can be nimbler in essence.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. And it ties together with, I mean, there's this interesting tension in the world of tech right now, isn't there? Which is, do you continue with smaller teams and
mm,
potentially make the teams even smaller than they are and even more autonomous? At
yeah.
which point you've got a bunch of teams who can all then go and explore things and try stuff out. Or do you try to centralize control and go founder mode and everything goes
Mm,
through like one person so that it's much more coherent? And there's
yeah.
this tension between incoherent experimentation, which is what you get with these smaller city states and the Swiss cantons. He loves Switzerland, doesn't he? And the
Yeah.
different cantons with their local governments that have a lot more power
Yeah.
than other
Taxes
companies or
go
local
up,
governments.
not down.
Oh, yeah, because people vote for taxes to go up in their local area
Yeah.
because they see it's
Yeah.
benefiting us in our local area. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. Versus, I've lost the thread, but yeah,
Mm,
this sort of
yeah.
centralized big
Yeah. Big
control
top
sort of
down.
stuff. Where they, oh
Okay.
yeah, because then you're looking for coherence across the whole country, or even, I suppose, the thought of coherence across the EU, and the
Mm,
question mark of, but can you have 350 million people in wildly different terrains and economic situations operate in a coherent way?
yeah.
Doesn't
That's
seem like it really.
or that sort of loosely coupled thing is, I guess, the aim to some degree.
Yeah,
Um, I want to
cool.
get a bit tactical with prioritization. Let's just talk about A team like the one I mentioned before that's doing really terrible prioritization at the moment because they don't have coherence
Yeah,
and they're changing their minds around. What does being anti-fragile look like in a tactical sense?
cool. So, one thing if you change it, so if you're jumping around different strategies, that's actually slightly different from anti-fragile prioritization on a
Okay.
particular project. So we can look
Mm,
at both of those things. So which projects do we try? And then there's a link that I'll share, which
mm,
one of my students just shared, which is brilliant. And
mm,
then you're going to love it. And then there is how do you sequence the work on a particular initiative so that it makes you
mm,
the most anti-fragile? So we'll start with the
mm.
second one first.
Okay.
So you've made your multiverse map of the initiative. You've got your theory of success. In order for us to succeed, we need to do all of these things. And we talked
Mm,
about this idea that maybe you were content marketers and that's the route you're taking, and you're going to make a digital product that does something, a coaching bot or something like that. And
hmm.
that's a fairly topical thing, isn't it?
Sure.
So what you're going to do first is a sense of where do we have the most uncertainty? So within this story, there are these steps. Now, some of these steps we'll have a lot more confidence about. And let's say we've got very experienced content marketers in the building who know how to spool up a content marketing system and can pretty reliably get us people to a landing page sorted.
Hmm.
Well, that then is low uncertainty. It
Hmm.
it becomes much more like crank the handle, we can make it happen. But we've never built an AI coaching bot before. So
Hmm.
that's where there's a lot more uncertainty. And we don't know
Hmm.
quite what it's going to look like. We've got a sort of a belief, but we think it's going to go wrong at various stages. We're not sure how to do it. Boom, okay. I think this is where I'm going into wild speculation. But my sense is we don't like uncertainty as humans. And so if there's just this inchoate uncertainty there, and then there's some stuff that we know how to do that we can work on that we like working on, we'll just go and
Hmm.
work on the stuff that we like working on. That's
Yeah.
fine. Now, you can't just say, no, no, don't do that. Go and look at the uncertainty because the uncertainty is infinite. There's a lot of
Hmm.
it, and you can't resolve all of it. That's never going to happen. And this is a problem that you see when you get people to go off and do research into the area
Mm.
that we're looking at. Is we've talked about this before, people who just go and follow interesting threads, but they don't actually help us with any of the decisions we're trying to make. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating.
In
Uh,
architecture, they call this bike shedding.
yes, that's it.
Yeah.
From
Like you
the
just
nuclear
design
power
the,
station.
yeah, just go design the bike shed if you can't figure out the big stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because everybody understands it and can have strong opinions about it. The big
Yeah.
stuff is scary. What if you look like an idiot? It's all that sort of fear.
Yeah.
Now, it was a really interesting thing that emerged from doing lots of multiverse mapping is when we make the multiverse map, we're telling this story, sharing our theory of success. Great. And now we've got a load of stories about what might go wrong and where it might go wrong. And we also find that we've got some senses of what the conversion rate, I suppose you could say, from one step to the next might be all the way along the map. And there
Mm.
are places where we're like, yeah, every time we write an email campaign, we get a 40% open rate. We know that's going to happen. Done. But there's
Hmm.
another place where we go, well, nobody could do this, or everyone could do this. We have no idea. That's a
Mm.
signal for uncertainty. So you're going to put a
Yeah.
big red dot on that. Boom, uncertainty.
Hmm.
There's a few of these methods for identifying uncertainty that work quite well. They're all in my course. There's three that I share, and I think they're good. But anyway,
Cool.
then once you've identified these very specific questions at the right level of granularity, people will naturally go and start figuring them out. There's a really good example where a team I was working with had to build to a deadline a system that interacted with a new API that Facebook had created. Love it or hate it, that's what we had to do.
Hmm.
It was the thing we'd promised to a partner, had to happen. On day one, we made the multiverse map and we mapped out how we thought it should work, and it was going to be really nice, good user experience. But we spent half an hour mapping this out, and we realized, oh, hang on a minute, there's this API, big red dot on it. Okay, an engineer said, oh, we've got the documentation, so we think we know what it should be. I'm going to go and run a test on it, a tech spike. And he came back the same day and said, right, the documentation is a complete lie. It doesn't do any of that. It does this instead. I've managed to figure out what it does do. And that
Okay.
meant that we had to change the entire user experience from top to bottom. It didn't do
Ooh.
80% of what we thought it was going to do, and it did some different stuff. But because we'd spent half an hour making a multiverse map, bosh, easy. Change it in another 20 minutes,
Hmm.
rewrite a bit of copy, and it was sorted. What typically would have happened and what I've seen happen on other projects is work up these high fidelity designs, start building a load of code, connect it up to the
Hmm.
API. Oh God, at the 11th hour, it's all a disaster. We have to rework it and bodge it, and it's not very good anymore. So that's an
Mm.
example of anti-fragile prioritization. We benefited from that uncertainty because we went there first and because we made it specific and the right level of granularity for an engineer to go, I can grab that and figure it out now. It's the sort of puzzle I like.
Hmm.
Great, we made progress.
So, in essence, what we're saying is making it safe to shine a light on the uncertainty changes what you do first,
Yeah,
potentially, right?
I love that. Yeah,
And then means that you're not committing large amounts of resources to something that might actually be completely blown out of the water later on. I'm actually realizing I have a client that I kind of knew that they'd done this, but they've been betting on an AI type thing for a build with almost nothing in the public sphere for about 18 months, with some very big promises to various other parties. A very untested proposition. Let's be fair to them. A lot of these uncertainties are shared by anybody playing in the LLM space at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah,
But like there was a big bet on how users are going to behave. And I think I said to them at the time, I really wouldn't be investing too much in that as a technical piece until you've done Wizard of Oz or something else to kind of really firm up the hypothesis that you have here. Yeah, anyway, lots and lots of investment. I'm really crossing my fingers for them that it works out.
yeah, yeah. I'm crossing my fingers too. It can
Yeah.
be very exciting, but yeah, it is so. One thing that the AI tools create is really easy to do Wizard of Oz. You're saying, well, an LLM is going to be involved at this point of the flow. We'll just
Yeah.
put you between the user
Yeah.
and the LLM, like as an intermediary, and you're
Yeah.
testing the real thing. It's great.
Yeah.
You get to
Yeah.
hone your prompts as you go, and you learn a lot. And that's the other
Yeah.
sort of way you're going to benefit from anti-fragile prioritization. When we then
Mm.
look at, how do we choose between all these different ideas? That's where I'm going to share. First, a big shout out to Phil Hesketh, who shared this with me. It's something from a company called Chromatic, and it's called the Chromatic Innovation Management Game by
Mm.
Chromatic. And what happens is you've got, those like tink, 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 where a ball
Yeah. Yeah.
bounces down the whole thing. So you've got this sort of triangle with the ball bouncing down, and that's a model for how your innovation might work. And on one end
Mm.
of the scale, the payback is $0. And it's zero, zero,
Mm.
zero, zero, all the way through to like halfway through. And then it starts going up, but in exponential increments. So you get $50, $100, 250, all the way up to $2,000 return. And it costs
Mm.
you, I think it's something like, it costs you to move an idea through the stages. So every time it goes through a
Mm.
stage, bing, 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 $10 cost, $10 cost, $10, and it all adds up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what you get is then this distribution, obviously, where very few ideas are going to get down to the most high value.
Mm.
Most ideas are going to end in the middle, which is largely $0 or $50, which is actually a
Mm.
loss compared to how much you invest.
Mm.
And so quite a nice sort of model. And as you go through
Mm.
the game, it gives you this
It's
intuition
pachinko,
sense.
right? I think is that the game? Yeah.
Pachinko is the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, love it. It's a brilliant idea from Chromatic to
Mm.
represent innovation this way. And they say, look, this is a simplification, obviously, but it really drives home the point that you have to kick off a bunch of ideas because you can't predict which way
Mm.
this is going to go in the
Mm.
market, send them all down.
Yeah.
And you start to look at, well, we could put in some gates. So we kill ideas that are on the wrong side of the,
Mm.
what do you call it, pachinko, on the wrong
Mm.
side of the pachinko board, where it's very unlikely that they're going to make any money. We can kill them.
Mm.
And you start to find that there's a way you can improve your average return by killing ideas early.
Mm.
And that's one of the tricks with anti-fragile prioritization. If you go to the biggest area of uncertainty, that's where it's going to kill you probably. It's
Mm.
probably something about, do people even want this? Or
Yeah.
it's, can we actually get anything to work with this? And you can test that relatively cheaply, very, very fast as well. if
Mm.
you are open to it, I suppose. And that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
challenge. Um, it gets even better though, because then he puts in the idea of pivot triggers and the idea that you can, instead of being a gate where you just kill the idea, instead
Hmm.
change the idea, iterate on the idea, and have another go and see if you can find an iteration that actually does bring it into the higher value possibilities. And
Mm.
then you get to the idea of, well, what if we were able to change the weighting of how expensive each stage was? So it's not the
Hmm.
same cost every time, but we make it cheaper at the beginning and then more expensive only at the end when we're relatively certain.
Yeah,
And so finding these tools that enable you to test more ideas cheaply early on becomes then the answer.
yeah,
Tools that enable you to test the ideas cheaply and pivot if they are not looking strong, or kill them if you can't pivot them to something good.
right.
And it's like, this is
Which,
the best sales pitch for our methods that I have come
yeah,
across.
no, it's really good. Which brings us to, a topic, the timely topic that we've been sort of touching on in many of our conversations. I've been imagining product development as a sort of timeline, if you like. And there's often been a tension between the suck it and see and learn types at one end, and then the big vision types on the other end of the spectrum, and that there is a threshold to sort of test an idea or throw it away that's variable on this timeline.
Yeah,
And we have practices like Amazon's PRFAQ, where literally hundreds of ideas are being thrown away on paper before they go anywhere near testing, A/B analytics, anything like that. They're just throwing away literally hundreds of ideas. So it's a very kind of upfront process,
yeah,
very intellectual, kind of inward facing in a way,
yeah,
but at the same time, um, a massive like top layer filter to your pachinko analogy, right? That a
yeah,
lot of ideas don't even go near the funnel if you're doing something like that.
yeah, yeah. And actually,
Uh,
for Amazon, it's that's a really
mm,
good example of it's very cheap
mm,
in terms of like real world resources. For the
yeah,
individual who's working up that PRFAQ, it's quite expensive, but to Amazon,
mm,
that's nothing, so it's
yeah,
a really
indeed.
good system.
And what's been occurring to me about like where that threshold sits is now potentially moving, right? If suddenly the shape of product teams changes and we can prototype and test much faster, then where that happens, that threshold or that test or that kind of throw it away, that's going to radically shift. And I think a big question for the upfront thinkers, the Amazons, is do you shift your practice if it's so easy to try something out? Like, is it worth trying an idea that you think is half-assed because it costs you way less than it used to? You
Yeah.
know, I don't know. Yeah. Do
Mm,
you
yeah,
need to
yeah,
do,
that probably does.
the UX designers like us would have done lots of discovery and created lots of certainty in previous years. Mm, maybe that's not so necessary anymore.
Maybe not necessarily. And
Yeah.
did it did it work reliably for you?
I've been thinking about that a lot. Um, it's highly contextual in
Yeah,
that is the key thing you're trying to achieve fundamentally uncertain, like as in opening up a new market, right, for a
yeah,
new product? Or is it overhauling an existing process where there's not a lot of uncertainty about whether people are going to do it or not, and you're just effectively making it usable and simple?
yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of my work was on that end. There's not a huge amount of uncertainty. I remember the hexagon diagram, like, what value is findable, and then there was valuable, I think, in the middle. I think UX's failure, design's failure, has been promising too hard on that when it is a fundamentally uncertain thing.
yeah,
The other stuff, not so uncertain. You can make things accessible, you can make things valuable, you can make things generally findable pretty reliably with UX, and you can do a lot of upfront discovery to solve those problems, but you can't necessarily fulfill on the promise of people are going to love this product.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a perfect way of putting it. That's the same thing I've been meditating on as well. And it
Mm.
takes us to another of our favorites, but you've got Cynefin and
Yeah.
those classic design methods that work really reliably are on the ordered side where it is.
Yeah.
There are already hundreds of people using this, thousands of people, whatever, and we're going to make it a bit better. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Research
Yeah.
upfront, brilliant. You can do a great job with that. And you
Yeah. Yeah.
shouldn't
Indeed.
be iterating and doing agile. You
No.
should come up with the right idea and deliver that.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's the domain of experts,
Yeah.
which is great. Whereas, yeah, like you say, the value, we're opening a new market, we're trying to figure out a new value proposition, we're trying to provoke novel behavior that nobody's done before and capture
Mm.
something complex and bring it to something that we can scale. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, no amount of research can make you win a pachinko game.
No. I remember Jake Knapp talking about why he got frustrated with design at Google and where the sprint methodology comes from. And he was like, why are people doing months and months and months when we should just be running a cheap little test to see if this even has legs, and
Yeah.
let's shorten that, you know? And so I think we're seeing an extension of that trend with tools like, Lovable and Bolt and so on, right? Why on earth would we spend far much more energy? Because, you remember that famous pottery study where they asked people,
Yeah,
wife
but we've done
teachers,
a podcast episode about it as well. Do 100
all
things,
right,
all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Do you build 200 random crazy ideas or just stick with one and make it the best? Clearly, one side of that tends to have better results from certainly people who are amateurs, right?
Yeah,
Learning as they go.
exactly. And if you're entering a new market, doing a new sort of product thing, I could argue anyone in digital technology is an amateur, pretty much.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. We're on this cliff edge of uncertainty almost all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know
Yeah.
if there's a segue into this, but
Well, I just wanted to
categorizing. Oh,
note
go on.
that the idea or that Jake Knapp seems to have come up with a very similar
Mm,
principle to Alberto Savoia, also coming out
mm.
of Google, who wrote the Write It. I think you probably know his work, do you?
Not ringing a
No,
bell,
okay,
but
okay.
okay.
Really good book. The Write It, very influential for me
Mm,
and innovation tactics, I would say. Um,
mm,
and his coining was pretotyping. So rather than prototyping, where we're building the thing, a
mm,
pretotype is like the illusion that this thing exists in the market, usually.
mm,
And how do we then see? So a canonical example is goo chocolate puddings in the
mm.
UK, which
Yeah.
people outside the UK probably won't know about, but
Mm,
it's a sort of luxury chocolate pudding.
mm.
When the creator of Goo Chocolate Puddings was coming up with the idea, did he spend ages in the kitchen making the perfect chocolate pudding recipe? No, he made up some cool looking boxes that were empty and snuck them onto the shelves in a supermarket and then watched if people picked them up. And then if they did, he'd have a chat with them about what they were expecting and what they thought about chocolate puddings. And then he was able
Uh,
to design a chocolate pudding that was the right fit. Um,
wow, that's a lovely story. I'm going to use that one. I'm
It's
having
a
that.
nice one.
Sorry.
The writer
Yeah.
is packed with these great sort of examples of prototyping, and then I've collected
Okay.
more from other places. But one
Yeah.
thing I've noticed with it is it's quite intellectually challenging to do. So coming up
Mm,
with good prototypes involves a lot of thinking, and you can't just turn it on.
no.
What I, Multiverse mapping is one way to try and help you do that. That's where it all came from, was trying to help people design good prototypes. I can
Mm,
see that Jake Knapp, what he's done is basically to make a crank handle version of here's how you make a prototype that
yeah.
covers off a lot of the issues that tend to happen. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
put PRFAQ into that same category.
yeah.
Um,
Although it doesn't go into the market at any point, does it? It's just a
no.
sort of, it's really a coherence test. Is this
Yeah.
idea coherent with what we know about the world and what we can achieve? And the big thing for Amazon is the only ideas that's worth investing in for them are ones that are probably going to be massive winners, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's not going to make a dent.
No, indeed.
Yeah.
I think their test is with their own intellect, right? By having it critiqued by dozens and dozens of people, you perhaps learn the same things that you would by putting it in front of users on a Friday during a sprint, or you can dismiss a few ideas on that basis. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a shout out to multiverse mapping. I reckon it's got
Mm.
about a 50% kill rate for ideas as well. So
Mm,
you
interesting.
map out your idea and then you go, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
That's
Um,
underpants gnomes. Yeah. Okay.
Whiff of underpants here.
So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So the next thing you wrote was categorizing the work. So let's say we've uncovered some uncertainty and we want to go and kind of make some real bets now. We want to put some stuff into action. So tell me about using appropriate methods when choosing the work and why would we categorize in this way?
Cool. So, well, we touched on one really important one earlier, which is
Mhm.
this ordered? and we can go and analyze and come up with the right answer? Or is this
Hmm.
complex, uncertain? Are we only going to know the right answer after we've done it? And so,
Mm.
do you take an iterative approach where you're going to try something, rough draft, and figure it out as you go? Or are you going to get an expert who knows exactly what they're doing to tell you the right answer? So that's
Mm.
one that's clear.
Mm.
The other that's really big, I think, in a lot of companies is not all work is the same. So product teams and product processes tend to end up looking like kind of funnels or machines where everything goes through the same process and where there's no differentiation between different bits of work. But
Mm.
you and I both know that within any sort of digital offering, bits of it are going to need to be outstandingly good. And there need to be, this is where the real value is created. It's got to be head and shoulders above the competition. 10x better is the standard if you want to take your customers from your
Mm.
competitors. Other bits need to just be there. And
Mm.
if you invest too much in those, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You just want it to be just good enough, just cross the bar of crap into okay. And if
Yeah.
you invest in that, it's not going to gain you anything, and your customers aren't going to care, and it's
Mm.
just wasting your effort. And then there's another category where actually it doesn't matter to customers at all, but someone in the company has promised it to a partner or someone else, and it
Oh,
has to be
yeah.
done, but you don't actually even need to make it okay. It can just be done. As long as it exists, you've ticked the box, and
Mm.
no one's ever going to use it. Now, those are kind of extremes. It's never usually quite that clear that the level of investment is so great. But
Mm.
you do need to understand, and this is something else that we challenge through like setting pivot triggers and things like this, often not explained to the team by the executive why this idea actually matters, why this feature is being pushed into the
Mm.
roadmap here. Is it because they see it's genuinely going to deliver outcomes? In which
Mm.
case, well, let's go and check if those outcomes are going to happen. And if they're not, we really need to pivot that idea, change it, do something else that will deliver the outcomes. And that's the most
Mm.
important thing. Or is it something where actually, no, we've promised this specification to somebody powerful and we have to build exactly this in the time allotted. And if it doesn't deliver outcomes, that's fine, actually, as long as it does this thing.
Mhm.
You need to understand that these are different, fundamentally different ways of working. Otherwise, the team ends up thrashing, confused because they told us that they want these goals, but this thing won't meet the goals. And so now we're stressing that we're trying to make this thing meet the goals that can't meet the goals. And we've
Yeah.
also blown past the deadline, and it turns out the deadline was the most important thing.
I worked with a team last year where there were some very, very important things that needed to be built. I would say outcome first. And the sales team were promising the deadlines. And so they became deadline driven things that were actually really important to get right for customers.
The worst
And
of
it was
both worlds.
really, really tough on the team. I managed to advocate for a much longer period of discovery. I was like, we're going to eat the pain. We're going to ask the salespeople to eat the pain here because the risk to them for next year's sales or retaining these customers is too high. That was essentially the leverage I used. But this organization had never allowed product teams to invest more than a week, I'm going to say, on discovery. And I think we took about 6 weeks to get really, really clear on the problem. And actually, the prop, the Trojan horse, was a deck. It was the story, right? I was getting them to tell the story of compressing, refining down. Okay, this is the nature of the problem. Tell me why this problem is going to be solved in this way. And that's really what I learned, and probably you did too as a UXer, right? Is that the process of going through telling a story about all the facts and all the stuff that you're sitting around sharpens the thing that you're doing, right? And that's the thing.
And they're interrelated. Like the thing you're
Yeah,
building probably doesn't quite fit with what you think it is. But
yeah,
as you figure that out more, you sharpen the problem you're solving, which then iterates, and you go, oh no, actually we could do it like
yeah,
this instead, which highlights another element of the problem, which so
yeah.
it's a sort of back and forth. No.
It is. Yeah, I think one of the things I talk about in my talks recently is like being a really great communicator is selfish, right? In the sense that you think you should present, if somebody says spend more time on your presentation or spend more time writing up your, PRD documents or whatever it is, right? And you would think that's for everybody else to understand. And my argument is no, it's for you to understand it because how you talk about a thing shapes the thing. And that's why you should invest more time in your communication. Come on to my workshops. Yeah.
It's true. Do go to Ben's workshops.
Yeah. So now you've you've uncovered some uncertainty and decided that your priorities are different, or you've reshaped the map. You've prioritized some work and going, okay, we can kind of do that one quickly and don't need to test that too hard. Or this one's like actually outcome driven. We're not going to put a deadline on that one. And then cadences, right? Yeah. So this is where a lot of organizations come very, very unstuck, right? Which is that they want to standardize, they want to do all the nails are the same to that hammer, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay,
Just make every
so
piece of work fit into this box
right,
size.
yeah. So what have you seen work that equals sustainable cadence in an environment where you do have a lot of different messy sized, messy bet problems that the teams need to work on?
Cool. So the big question is what's comfortable for the organization. So I'm sure you've
Mm,
noticed this as well. Most organizations kind of have a natural tempo, and that's the cadence they work in, and it's very difficult to sustainably work outside of that cadence. So as a default, fit your bigger picture stuff to the organization's cadence. Don't try to force
mm,
them to do things differently. And if they're doing quarterly planning or monthly planning or yearly planning, that's one level you're going to have to fit into.
mm,
Within that, there's an example of clever resistance from an organization which I didn't work at, but I've heard this story. They were forced to go agile all the things. We're going to scrum everything. And every team had to do scrum and they had to
mm,
decide the length of their sprints. And that was the rule. And there was one team who was doing just a massive infrastructure rebuild that should have just been an 18-month project, classic waterfall. It was
mm,
fully in the ordered space. You could absolutely
mm.
predict everything, and it just took a long time. So
Yeah,
they just set that their sprint length was 18 months, and then they had complied with the directive.
I see. Yeah.
Completely the other end of the scale, there was a team that I worked with, and this was a sort of the birth of pivot triggers, multiverse mapping, all this sort of stuff. And
Mm,
we ended up working in week-long sprints,
mm,
because what we found is we aligned with our customers' cadence, and they were people in e-commerce, merchandising, who they had a Monday morning meeting every single Monday where they were getting up at 6 in the morning to collect a load of data to go into a meeting. And we
mm.
started then getting up at 6 in the morning so we could send them actionable insights. And we
Well
just
done.
did this for 10 weeks in the end. And each week we would iterate on the report we were sending them. And it was really rough and ugly. It was
Mm,
done in Excel, not Excel, Google Sheets, but hideously
mm,
ugly. Not what we were going to release full time or in the perfect version. But for that early stage thing where we needed to iterate quickly, we fit in with our customers' cadence, not our preferred
mm.
cadence.
Yeah.
Now, once the rate of change slowed down on this thing, and we found something that was working, that people were opening, using to make decisions, and then making more money off the back of, then we said, great, now we can relax a bit. We're going to go
Mm,
into our organization's natural tempo, which is 2 week sprints. And now we're going
mm,
to be building it at a high quality and et cetera, et cetera. So that's
mm,
an example I've seen. You can play with it. You can push faster for a while. You can slow down if it's relevant for your project, et cetera, et cetera.
mm.
One other really nice example is a 1 day sprint. So this is useful as a diagnostic tool. So if you're reliably failing to meet your sprint goals and not delivering, then try 1 day sprints for a week. Can you even ship in a day? Or is it
Mm,
taking you longer than a day to get your code base delivered to the world? If it
mm,
is, well, that's probably why you're failing to ship every time. And you need to fix
mm.
that before you go back to longer sprints. That's, you know,
Oh, yeah, that's nice. Yeah. What's the smallest chunk you could try and achieve in a day? Uncover the problems in your workflow. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. You reminded me that an organization's perception of time is just one of the most important things you have to respect, right? The first time I really deeply understood it was I worked for Dennis Publishing on one of their magazine titles,
Yeah.
and it was for a magazine called Evo, which is about high performance cars, for those who don't know it. One of the things I realized that was part of my own personal post-mortem was that you couldn't get anybody's attention at certain points in the month. Right? Because it's a magazine organization, right? There is this massive compression of time towards the end of the month, and it was just impossible to work around that. But of course, we were just like, oh, yeah, this is our discovery process. Da, 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 da. And I realized in hindsight, like, oh, God, I would have done that totally differently to respect the way they work. I would have paused for a few weeks, right? I mean, nobody would have liked that inside the agency. But at the same time, that's what would have been effective, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because,
And it
you know,
because it wasn't actually you couldn't get anyone on the phone or do anything useful.
no, one other thing that happened was that people wanted to be involved. Like there was an excitement about what we were building, but then they'd be like, okay, today I can work. And then tomorrow, like, oh my God, Burning Fire magazine's coming out in 3 days' time. If you really want to understand how to bend like a reed in the wind when you're dealing with an organization, understand those time frames, those cadences, because I guess like they exist in all organizations, but at Dennis, being a magazine publisher, it just makes it really explicit in your face, right? This is how people work,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And it's very, very time oriented.
And it's very
Whereas for
predictable,
others,
isn't it?
yes,
You know when
exactly.
it's being published and you know
Yeah,
exactly what the week beforehand is
yeah,
going to look like.
yeah. And ironically, the product we were working on was trying to break that rhythm, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Because we're moving to a digital world. Why do you need it to be that way? Anyway, a whole other story.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Let's put a pin in that for another time because I'm interested in the question of can you actually break an organization's rhythm?
mm,
I think that's surprisingly hard.
yeah. Yes, indeed. Last
Right.
thing that you sent to me was influence strategy through stories and options. Why is that at the end? That doesn't, I'm not quite getting why that's the last point you wrote. It might have been just random. Is there a reason why that one is last?
Good question. It could also be first,
Ah,
but
okay.
all of the above ones sort of ladder up to that. Because
Yeah.
let's take an example where we've done a visual model and we talked about this thing where we're going to do content marketing for some sort of AI coach thing.
Hmm.
We then realize where uncertainty is, which is in the AI coach. This is all off the top of my head, and I have no idea if this is realistic at all, but I think it's about right.
Okay, okay.
We've now realized that, okay, it's an outcome first thing. So what we really care about is that people actually want to come and get AI coached and that it works. And
Hmm.
you already mentioned it. We could do this as a kind of Wizard of Oz, and we can use our initial content marketing team's capabilities to see if we can get people in. But we want to go
Hmm.
even quicker than that for the beginning because we know this is highly uncertain and we think that they're probably going to do coaching on a daily basis or maybe a weekly basis. So a weekly
Hmm.
sprint sounds sensible. We might even try and do like 2 day sprints to begin with, just to
Hmm.
get fast signals coming back in. So the
Hmm.
very first thing we might do is say, okay, I think that that a certain sort of person is going to want an AI coach to help them with, I don't know, their small business or something like that.
Hmm.
And I think I know maybe 10 people like that. Do you know anyone like that? Oh, well, I know about 10 people like that too. Okay, let's email those 20 people and offer them free access to our AI coach bot if they'll commit to a certain amount of time, etc., etc. And we set a pivot trigger. Okay, if we email 20 people who should want this, how many of them is enough for us to say that's looking pretty strong?
Hmm.
And so we craft an email and we send it, and we can get a response. We can do that within 2 days. We can set a deadline for this in the email and say you need to respond.
Hmm.
And then we get the signal back. Now, there's a few signals that we could get back. The most common one is on the left of that pachinko board. Nobody
Hmm.
replies, and we get nothing
Yeah.
back. Well, that is a signal, and we now say, right, in this sort of multiverse map, everybody's gone into the they don't want it bucket, and we've
Hmm.
got these stories about why that might be happening, and we're going to tell more than one story. So I say influence strategy through stories in that organizations are run on narratives. And
Hmm.
the reason we do work is not logical. deductive sort of, hey, this is going to increase the balance sheet. It's all about creating meaning within the narrative structures that we operate in our lives. And I thought this was just designers and we were all sort of particularly messy about that. But I realized the more I work, no, everybody is doing this
Mm.
and you're just trying to create meaning. And that's how prioritization tends to happen. We all have theories of success and we have stories about what works and what doesn't work and what's the sort of thing that we should do and what good people do and what bad people do. And
Mm.
so that guides the sorts of things that are even acceptable to the organization. Now, this is going back in my career, I spent a while thinking, great, we can be more scientific. I'm going to train my team not to tell stories about why things are happening. This was when we were doing
Mm.
A/B testing. And narrative fallacy, it's a common thing in the A/B testing industry. You need to know why one thing won over the other so you can then extend. It doesn't work. You can't
Mm.
know why one thing wins over another. You don't know, and you're wrong when you think you know why.
Mm.
And if you try and apply it to other things, it's going to fail because you don't
Mm.
understand the context well enough. You can't because reality has too much detail. So I tried to get people to stop committing the narrative fallacy, and it
Mm.
failed utterly. What happened was they were still committing it, they just didn't tell me about it. I was
Yeah.
committing it too, and I didn't tell anyone about it. So
Yeah.
instead, I flipped it round, and this is a shout out to Jennifer Garvey Berger. She's got her book, Escaping Leadership Mind Traps, I think it is, and it's simple habits to help you work in complexity. And
Mm.
one of them is don't get trapped in simple stories. And her simple
Mm.
remedy is tell more than one story. And so what I started doing, instead of say, okay, let's pull out the story you're telling about why you're seeing this signal. Now pull out another story. Now another story. What else could be explaining the signals that we're seeing? And what I noticed was two things. As we told more stories, we thought of more things that we could do off the back of those. So we ended up with more
Oh,
options for actions we could take. But what
yeah.
was even more interesting is we started to notice more things about the world. And we would
Mm.
remember, oh, yeah, of course, there was that time when this happened and somebody said that. And then there was this market research report that I read which supports that story.
Mm.
And what you realize is, whatever story you're trying to tell, you will think of evidence to support that story. You can always tell at least three. And what you
Yeah.
then find is you relax your grip on the story that you really needed to be true in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, yeah.
And that
Yeah.
ties into your work around stories.
Narrative as a ideation method
Mm.
rather than a what would it be? Conclusion driven way of thinking.
And then the
Yeah.
final point, just to really wrap it up, is
Mm.
creating options for action.
Hmm.
So something else I noticed that I'm sure you've seen as well, when the organization is dead set on plan A and you're pushing forward with plan A, the option of, well, we think plan A is doomed, let's stop it, doesn't go anywhere. You
Mm.
keep going because, well, what else are you going to do? We can't just do nothing. We've got to keep people busy because we're paying for them.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Well, there's sunk cost fallacy and there's also busy engineers fallacy. So we've got
Hmm.
to keep the engineers busy because they're expensive. So let's have them building something. And because we've decided to do plan A, we're going to keep doing that. Now, what I realized is no amount of evidence will persuade people to stop doing plan A. What you need to do instead is collectively, through this narrative process and through generating more options, find an option that they prefer to plan A to switch to. And
Hmm.
if there's something which is like, yeah, that feels better and it feels like a good use of our time and it feels like it's going to work, let's do that. Great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Um,
So the big thing I've got with these, this is thought through with experience behind it, but it's still
mhm.
early days for this. And thank you for this conversation as a way of sort of testing and iterating on these five constraints. I'm quite sure I'm missing something, and I'm quite sure some of these are wrong. Do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts at this point, or should we let it gestate?
Oh, I probably need to stew on it, but the thing that's first popping into my head is that um I mean, I guess this is partly what you're doing in your workshops is trying to make sense of the mess, right? Like we've got an enormous number of options right here, all appropriate in different contexts, but trying to narrativize, processize some of them, picking them out and saying, okay, this is a roughly sensible order in which you should start to think about it, or at least a cycle, right? I guess that's what you're implying, like with stories and options being at the end. This is a rough cycle you could follow to start thinking about um, how we might take some of these high level methods and putting them into action. Um, yeah.
And I mean, yeah,
So
cycle is good. Loopishness is, I'm going
right.
to bring that back. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to try and make it happen.
Yes. The next box will be a circular box. No, I'm
Yeah, oh, I like that. Like double.
joking. Yeah, right. Nice. Um, cool. I want to round us up. What's your key advice, given the things you've been thinking about over the last few months and identifying these as the important ones and kind of iterating how we deal with leaders? What's your advice to somebody to kind of shift their perspective and say, right, this is how I'm going to start operating with leadership?
Oh, right. Okay. So there's two angles of this. One is if you are a leader, I think that the experience you'll be having is we think we've got our strategy nailed, and
Mm,
yet it falls apart at execution. People aren't
mhm,
doing the things that I think they should be doing, and then it doesn't work, and they're not
mhm,
telling me early enough. I don't know what's really happening, and I don't know if I can trust them. And it looks like we're doing all the right things, but it doesn't feel right. Well,
mhm,
I would say consider these five constraints that we've been talking about. And the overarching principle behind all of it is speed to signal. Yes, you need to keep delivering, of course, but don't optimize for speed to just shipping anything. Optimize for speed to signal and know what
mhm,
signals you need early on because it's that where you're most uncertain. That's what's going to kill you, but it's also where your greatest opportunity is.
mhm,
Where you're most uncertain is where you're going to find the new idea that nobody could have today because you haven't gone and
mhm,
looked there. So that's for leadership. Now, if you are on a team and you're frustrated and like the team in your situation that you described,
mhm,
where it's all thrashing all the time, that sort of thing. First thing is accept that that's going to keep happening. So there
mhm.
isn't some
Yeah.
magical world we're going to get to where suddenly this choppy seas that the leadership are trying to navigate are going to calm again and we're going to be able to set a vision like we did back in 2015.
Mm.
That's that's gone. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need to operate in this new world. And the thing that you can do is change how you're talking with leadership. Take Ben's workshop. That's number one, because you're going to learn how to craft these stories. But then pick up a tool like multiverse mapping or some way where you can very quickly be like
Mm,
Pixar or Frank Gehry, where you are going to make a tiny, cheap model of what you're trying to build,
mm,
which enables you to poke it and check, does this actually make sense? You're then changing the conversation that you're having with leadership. That's the big thing.
mm.
Change
Yeah.
that conversation from technical debt. Oh no, we need to do this. Oh no, we need research up front, etc., etc.
Or engine is not busy enough. Yeah.
Yep, you're not going to change their minds
Mm,
with that, and no amount of
mm,
evidence will change their minds after the fact.
mm,
What you can do instead is say, right, there's this initiative you've given us. We've mapped it out and we've seen that the biggest risks in this are A and B. And so
yeah.
we're going to do a probe this week for A and B. We're doing a spike here and we're going to email 40 customers here, or we're going to put out an advert here. And if we don't get this many responses, or if you don't see that the API is 80% as we expected, you get to set the conditions and you share them
Mm,
with the leadership. That's what we're going to do.
mm.
Any objections? And what you typically hear back then is a different sort of conversation from the one you've been experiencing.
Yes. With that layer of politics, promises, posturing that you
Yeah,
often get up front. And again, coming back to your point, acceptance is the way.
yeah, yeah,
Like there's stuff going on. It's that classic quote, isn't it?
yeah.
Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
That is it.
Uh,
I think the biggest thing that I think I had to learn that led me to this kind of approach is you can ask people to tell you what they really care about and why they're really doing this, and they're
mm,
never going to tell you. Partly
yeah.
because they don't want to admit it, partly because they don't know themselves. And sometimes it's also something that they are sworn to secrecy over, and this is something that's strategically protected. The idea that you
Yeah.
can make the strategy transparent to the entire organization, you
Yeah.
realize is a nonsense because part of what makes a strategy work is that it is secret.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. I do think there are organizations that have some culture, principles, rules in place to discourage playing of games and making
Yeah.
progress more transparent, which I don't think you can bottom up that but it does
No,
work in some organizations.
it does.
Um,
Absolutely. This
yeah,
is where I think you can't bottom up it, but I've seen that this kind of multiverse mapping pivot triggersy sort of thing, you're at least testing your organization to see if there's appetite for it. You
yeah,
might hear back, don't you dare do this. Don't you dare go and do that
yeah.
test. You won't hear it in those terms, but you will
No,
get strongly discouraged from finding signals that cast any doubt.
disprove somebody's favorite idea or yeah,
Yeah,
what they've sold
exactly.
in. Yeah, yeah, indeed.
And you've got to do, you smell that out, and then at
Mm.
least you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, indeed. There's that book. I never really bought his answer on this, but there's the book Robert something, The 52 Laws of Power,
48 Laws of Power. Yeah,
48
Robert.
Laws of Power. And I haven't read it, but I saw him talking about it on a YouTube clip once, and he was talking about the fact that you should know the laws so that you know what other games people are playing. And of course, most people are reading it from, I would guess, a Machiavellian perspective, like what games can I play
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
to make progress in my career. But his point was the reason I wrote the book is to shine a light on it. This is the games other people play. I don't totally buy that answer because he
No, I
also
don't either.
talks about very Machiavellian things he's done himself, which I thought kind of gave the game away.
I think it gives the game away. I've
Yeah.
read tiny bits of it, and
Mm.
it was so depressing. I couldn't keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I scanned it in a bookstore once and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't stomach this. No, absolutely not. So yeah, so there's this little mini paradox in there. Like, how could you aware, adapt, sense to your point what's going on at that layer without being sucked into it and also being resilient to it, right? Like it is the way it is, you know. I think there's some undiscovered method here, which reminds me, I read a thread on Reddit some time ago describing product management as there's two ways. There is real product management, painful, likely to get stabbed in the back,
yeah.
or
You're going to
just
generate genuine value for customers, but it's really
yeah,
hard. It's going to take too long.
or
Or,
the person who was writing it was like, this is how I avoid all the trouble and progress my career. And it was
well,
so
working only a
tragic.
normal
Yeah,
number of hours. Yeah.
exactly. It was a very, very tragic summary
I
of where
think I
product
read
is
the
at.
same thing, and
Yeah,
I was so depressed by it. And I
yeah,
shared it around in a few places and just was like,
mm,
is this how everyone's actually doing it?
yeah. I
Um,
don't think that's necessarily how everyone's doing it
no,
at all, but
it's not.
it made me look back and go, yes, I can see some archetypal strategies that I've seen in play. Yeah.
Yes. And in the 48 Laws of Power. I would say
Yeah.
final thought on that
Yeah.
is the bigger the company, the more likely it's all about that
Of
stuff.
course.
Small
Yeah.
startups, you don't have time or money or the bandwidth for that. You've got to be figuring
No.
out reality.
Yeah.
But the bigger the organization, the more insulated you are from reality.
Yeah. I I knew somebody who worked at Twilio and one of their principal values is no shenanigans. I think that's the way they put it.
Right.
And I actually really should go back and talk to them and go like, what did that actually mean? You know, because it's a big organization,
Yeah,
right? What
yeah.
does that mean
And
in practice? Yeah.
in practice, and then the other question I've got for that, as soon as you write down values, I don't think they're your
Mm.
values anymore because now people know the official thing, and
Mm.
any game player worth their salt can play the
Yeah.
game around those values.
Within that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But I
reframe what
guess,
they wanted to do anyway to fit the values that you've
yeah.
just written up there.
Yeah, of course. I do think the general impression I got was it did actually make for much more straightforward, honest behavior, despite, yes, it could be gained. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's leave it there.
On that positive
Uh,
note.
well, uh, I've I've learned some things. It's been really interesting to talk to you about it. Yeah. Thank you for your time
Cool.
today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the excellent grilling and great
Mhm.
conversation. Next time, I'm going to suggest that we do flip the roles,
Ah, okay. Yeah, we
and
can
I'll
do that.
I'll do you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
That sounds good.